So 206, while it started to become a very, very good card with the addition of the Kennedy fight against Rashad Evans, and now it's, well, at least they're hoping it's going to be Kelvin Gastelum against Kennedy, and we can get to that in a second. Also, the addition of Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis wasn't a fight that was originally added to the card. Donald Cerrone against Matt Brown. All of a sudden, it started to be a very respectable card, and then you have the light heavyweight title on the line at the top. Well, now Cormier gets injured. Okay, so what does the UFC do? They try to book an interim light heavyweight title fight between Anthony Johnson and Gegard Mousasi. But like I said, Anthony Johnson said, thanks but no thanks. I don't want to fight for the interim belt. I want to wait. Now, credit to him, he's losing out on a paycheck and probably will lose money as a result of this because he's had to pay his coaches throughout this whole training camp. But he wants that belt. He wants to fight for the real belt, so he's going to wait. So now they're faced with a situation where they have no main event. They don't have Anthony Johnson. They don't have Daniel Cormier. So what they decide to do is elevate the co-main event, which was Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis, to the main event, to the headlining act, and make it for the interim featherweight title. Now, this is where things get interesting. Interim featherweight title. Jose Aldo just won the interim featherweight title in July in a fight that we all sort of agreed on that shouldn't have been for an interim belt because Conor had just won the real belt in December by knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, but they did it because they expected him to not defend the title for quite some time. Fine. So they strip Jose Aldo of the interim featherweight title. They now make Holloway versus Pettis for the interim featherweight title. They strip Conor McGregor of the real belt, and they make Jose Aldo the real champion. And so this is what I'll say about this scenario. I've said on this show and time again on other shows, MMA Beat, etc., that if a champion does not defend his title for 12 months, or if a champion is not booked in a title fight within 12 months, meaning if Conor didn't have a fight coming up in January or February, but we already knew that he was booked as of now because he won the belt 11 months ago, then he should be stripped. Then the UFC is well within its rights of stripping. It has to be a 12-month period. Either they fight within that 12 months or they're booked and they're fighting in 13 or 14 months, but we know within the 12 months that their fight is coming up. So this may surprise some people. I do believe that the UFC was well within their rights to strip Conor McGregor. The problem is the why and the how. The why is a big issue. If Daniel Cormier did not get injured, Monday morning we're sitting here talking about Conor McGregor as the featherweight champion. Daniel Cormier's injury led to Conor McGregor getting stripped. That alone just tells you all you need to know about this scenario. That alone tells you that this doesn't make sense. Daniel Cormier's injury should have nothing to do with the featherweight division. So that's the why. They stripped Conor McGregor because Daniel Cormier got injured, and they needed something to headline this pay-per-view in Toronto on December 10th. It also tells you two other things, that the UFC doesn't have the confidence in the likes of Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis, which, by the way, we should all be very happy for those two. They're getting more money just because they're fighting for a belt. Fake or not, interim or not, they're getting paid, so I'm very happy for them. But they don't have the confidence in those two just headlining the show on their own in a fantastic fight, in a fight that we were all going gaga over when it was announced. 25 minutes of those two going toe-to-toe should be enough if you promote them the right way, if you get people emotionally invested in these fights. But they don't do that enough because they have too many cards, and they don't have enough time to do that. So they say, okay, we need to make it for a belt, but we can't make it for the real belt because Conor's the real champion, and Jose just won this interim belt, so let's make Jose the interim, go from interim to real, so that we can make this fight at least for a belt, so that will then trick the audience into thinking that this is a big deal. That's part two here. They don't have enough confidence in your ability to recognize that this interim belt that they are instituting now, the second one, is nothing more than just a Fugazi belt. It's not a real belt. It's just a promotional prop that they're putting in there to hope that they hope that will increase the pay-per-view buys. So they're doing this. Again, the why, Cormier gets injured, leads to this featherweight mess of a situation, but they botched it. They botched it epically. Here's how they botched it. They botched it because Holloway Pettis, if you're going to go ahead and strip Conor, Holloway Pettis needs to be for the real belt. Holloway Pettis needs to be for the real belt. And you say to Jose Aldo, you're getting the first crack at the champion. We're getting rid of this interim title. You've been talking about retirement. You've been talking about not fighting again. You've been talking about throwing fights. We don't know what the state of your career is. So we're going to make Holloway Pettis the real championship fight because we just stripped our biggest draw and our biggest star of his belt. That's one. That's what they had to do. Number two is the how. How did they strip Conor of the belt. The only way that this could have been seen as a positive, the only way that this could have been not seen as controversial, as a negative towards Conor, is if they let Conor do it himself. Now, Conor McGregor has been saying time and time again, I want to sit down with the new owners. I want to have a face-to-face. I want to have equal share. I want to be on the same page. They have yet to do that as of today. And so they trot out their announcers to say Conor McGregor has relinquished the title. He never agreed to that. And all that it has done is it has empowered him even more so than ever before. Now he has turned into a sympathetic figure. Now he has turned into someone that has been disrespected by his employer. Now he has turned into someone who has been wronged by his employer. And he has only become more powerful and more popular as a result. Conor McGregor has proven in 2016, above all, that he doesn't need a belt to be a big draw, to be the biggest star in the sport. So in the end, this doesn't really matter to him. He's still going to walk around with those 2 titles. He's still going to say, look, I beat this guy in 13 seconds. I beat this guy in 15 minutes back in, 2014, Max Holloway. I would beat this guy and this guy. I'm still the champ. I'm the people's champion. It really does nothing to him, and I can understand if he's upset at the way this went down. But the way in which they did it was a complete botch job, because they needed to convince him to do it on his own. Because if he told the public, look, I'm going to relinquish this title, we're on the same page, I'm going to come back, I'm going to fight at lightweight, I might go back at 145, people would have gone behind it. But the way in which they did it, and the fact that he hasn't said anything since, is a perfect move in my opinion, because his silence is deafening right now. He is telling you by not saying anything that he is very upset, that he is not on board with this. He didn't put out a statement. Notice that Aldo didn't even put out a statement as well. Aldo can't be happy about this situation. He doesn't want to get the belt on these terms. He doesn't want Conor out of his division as well. So that's why I feel like the why and the how is really the big story here, and how in which they did it was the big mistake of it all. They needed to get Conor on board. They needed to fly to Dublin and get him on board with this. And they needed to give him the respect of saying, look, we are going to put on a press conference. We're going to do something to make this seem like a big deal. Because the last time something like this happened in our sport, where a champion had to give up their belt willingly or not, and it had nothing to do with a steroid test or a criminal act or anything like that, was when George St. Pierre vacated the title after UFC 167. And what did they do then? They had a conference call with GSP and Dana White answering questions. This time, they have John Anik, with all due respect, reading off a piece of paper that all of a sudden Conor McGregor has relinquished the title. That makes it seem unimportant, in my opinion. You have to treat the titles like they are the most important thing in the company. This is what everyone is striving to get, because it leads to so much more. And it shows that they did not get Conor's permission to do this. In the end, he won that belt on his own. He should have had a say in when he gave it up. Now again, 12 months you don't defend it, I do believe they're in their rights to take it away. But they needed to get him on board in order to get the people on board. And it's a disservice to Holloway and Pettis, who are going to fight in an amazing fight in less than 2 weeks. It's a disservice to Jose Aldo, and it's a disservice, in my opinion, to Conor McGregor as well. So I just feel like, and oh, by the way, let's just talk about 206 for a second. Had they booked GSP on that card against anyone, against me, against New York Rick, against anyone in this office, all would have been forgotten, and they wouldn't have had to do this. And so that backfired on them as well. George St. Pierre was almost literally begging to be on this card, in a deal that, by all accounts, was very fair for both parties. A deal where he would be taking a major risk because he would be banking on the pay-per-view buys, and they didn't want to do it, and they put their foot down. More power to you. But this is what happens when you play that dangerous game. And now you're affecting 2 divisions. You're affecting the featherweight division. You're affecting the lightweight division, because you don't know how upset Conor is. What's he going to do now? Is he going to sit out in that division as well? Is he going to hold that division up as well? And you're kind of affecting the light heavyweight division too. People can recognize what's a real belt and what's not. They are not adding a single pay-per-view buy to UFC 206 because this is for the interim title. They might have if it was for the real belt. They might have. And those two certainly can make a case that they should be fighting for the real belt at this point, because they're being active, they're in there, they're fighting. But not now.